Hello Legends. In this video, we're going to be building out an AI SMS assistant. So in my previous real-time API videos, which is OpenAI's voice API, I've been building out an AI receptionist called Sophie, who works for my fictional Bart's automotive store. So in this video, we're going to be extending out the functionality for Sophie to also respond to customers via SMS. Before we get into this, let me just give you a demo of how this looks. Okay, so I've got my iMessage open on my computer and I'm going to be sending an SMS to this number, which is actually hosted on Twilio. So I'm actually using Twilio to provide the SMS number for me. And then I plug that into a make.com scenario. So back to our demo, let's message this assistant, hi there. Now there's going to be a small delay by the time we actually get a response back from the assistant. And we did this purposely for two reasons. The first reason is that we want to make this a little bit more human-like, because an immediate response is very AI obvious. Like if you're on a website, on a chatbot, and you get an immediate response, you obviously know you're speaking with AI. Now via SMS, you might want to have things a little bit more human-like. So we can fabricate a small delay to give the perception of we're speaking to a human. And we have our response, hi, how can I assist you today at Bart's Automotive? Now the second reason we have a delay is so that we can collect multiple messages at the same time. So in typical SMS conversations, even live chat conversations, or if you're on Facebook Messenger, in a group chat with your family and friends, you probably send multiple mini messages at the same time in a span of like 5 or 10 seconds. And SMS is no different. So we're also going to get small batches of SMS messages that really only need one response and not one reply per message. So let me show you how that looks as well. So I'm going to send two messages in a row. The first is going to be, what is the shop address? And the next is going to be, what are the open hours? And now these two messages should be collected into one message and then put through our OpenAI Assistance API. And then we'll only get one response back from our assistant. Awesome. And here is our response. So our shop's located at this address and we're open for these hours. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to is that at the end of this response, even though we're using the OpenAI Assistance API, we have no reference information here, which is exactly what we want. That was a purposeful move, so that we don't have additional reference information that kind of looks even more technical, even more AI. So as we just demoed, you can see that the assistant is able to receive and respond to SMSs, and it's able to handle multiple messages in batches. So over here, I've got an image of, on the left-hand side, I've got 4 messages in a row and then 1 response. And on the right-hand side, I've got 4 messages in a row along with 4 separate responses. So technically speaking, what we want to do is we want to batch cumulative messages that come in a short period of time and just generate one concise response to them that accounts for whatever context may be listed. So for example, here we've got, hi, how much is the hot tap? But also it's the one with the pump that I'm after. So there's multiple versions of the hot tap. We just want to stick to one specific version. And that's what we did here. We were able to respond to the query with the specific version in mind. Now I'm going to show you exactly how we did that in a make.com scenario. But I also want to show you the other side of the fence where if we didn't handle this appropriately, we would technically get a response for every message. So the first message would have a response, so hi, and then we would have, how can I help you? Then we would have, how much is the hot tap? And we would get a generic price for the hot tap for one of the models. But then as soon as we're processing the next question, which is the one with the pump, we'd get another price for the hot tap. So now the customer is going to get 2 separate prices, even though they asked about one product. And then the thanks message will also generate a bit more of a contextual response, which is no worries, let me know how I can help. So as you can see on the left-hand side, this is a lot better to just have one clear and concise response, as opposed to 4 responses for what is really meant to be one single message. So that's what we're doing over here. We're handling multiple messages in one batch. And now this assistant also does RAG without any of the reference tags. So over in Make, I've got a message and assistant module, which is using the OpenAI Assistance API. And I asked a question, which is, hi, what are the open hours? And as you can see here for the result from the assistant, we have the actual response. And since we're using reference material, we're also referencing the material that we used. So you can see there's a pretty ugly reference over here with these thick brackets, also the number, the FAQs, what the document was called. And technically this would be our response in the SMS. Now to bring up our messages again. So over here, you can see that we don't have the actual reference listed. But over here, we do have the reference listed. Now, there's a certain module that we use to get rid of this reference and to make our messages nice and clean like this. So that's what we're doing over here. We're doing RAG and we're removing these reference tags. And then finally, we're able to create a thread for ongoing messages. So I'll speak about this a little bit more later on, but basically we've got 2 routes here for our RAG. The first route is for new conversations and the second route is for existing conversations. So if you used the Assistance API before, you know that you can create a thread ID and you can append that thread ID to the API call, but then you can have an ongoing conversation for that specific customer. And that's what we do over here in our Google Sheet, where for every new conversation that we're starting with a customer, we reference their number, and then we append the newly created thread ID so that when they message us back again, we actually maintain the entire context of their previous conversation. We take this route where we're appending the thread ID into the API call and then having a continuous conversation. So as you can see, this is a pretty smart AI SMS assistant that handles multiple messages. It does RAG, it removes any reference tags, it has an ongoing conversation, remembers the customer's previous messages. So it's a very human-like experience. Now scrolling down, the functionality that we're using here is we're using Twilio to facilitate the phone number that we need to have this SMS conversation. I did have to create the A2P compliance in order to use this, but in this video, I'm not going to cover how to do that, just to kind of keep things short. We'll be using make.com to run our automation. And this is that make.com scenario that we're going to be running. So I'm going to break this down so you know exactly what's going on, so that when you need to personalize this ever so slightly for your own use case, it'll be very easy to do so. And finally, we're using an OpenAI assistant for the conversational messaging and the RAG. So that's what I've done over here. I've created a basic assistant. I've attached some files, which is just some basic FAQs for my Bart's Automotive store. And here's the prompt that I've used. By the way, I didn't even write this prompt. I just put maybe 1 or 2 sentences down, and I use this new OpenAI feature, which you just click generate. You give a short description of what you want the prompt to be, then you click create. So that's what I did over here, and it created this prompt for me, which is actually working really well. So those are the 3 tools that we need. So a lot of people are asking about my make.com scenarios, and to make this build as easy as possible for you, you can go across to my Gumroad and download it. It's going to be listed for free, so there's no paywall, and you don't have to give me your email or anything like that. But if you do use this and you're finding value in it, I'd appreciate if you could donate something as well. I've also got a couple of asks for you guys. So the first is, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. You'll help me grow my channel. You'll help me get my content out to more people. And it's a positive feedback loop that basically verifies that the content that I'm putting out, people are enjoying it, and I'm happy to sink in more time and build more cool things and then give them to you guys as well. Now, if you like my content, or if you're a business and you want to work with me, I'd appreciate if you could also fill out my survey, which I've linked in the description of this video. So this is the survey. It's basically me saying, hey, this is my first time running a YouTube channel. I want to get better and I hope you can help me. So if you choose this first section here, this is for people that want to learn from my YouTube videos, and you'll be asked a couple of questions about your experience level, what kind of tools you use, and then I ask for a little bit of feedback about what I'm doing. And a second option is, if you're a business and you want to hire me, I just ask for what you want built out and what your budget is. Now, finally, before we get into the actual video, a possible part 2 video would be me creating an outbound messaging assistant. So basically increasing the functionality so we can message people outbound. So for my example with my Bart's Automotive store, maybe I want to message people that have appointments to just confirm that they're going to come in. Maybe the A2P process is interesting for you guys. So can I also explain how my brother set it up for our business? And with the A2P process, you also want to make sure that you stay compliant. So if you're doing any outbound, you want to have a way to check if people are opting out of your message services. So I can also build something like this out. So if you guys want to see a part 2 about this stuff, please drop a comment and just say, yes, I'm interested in a part 2. And also, if you're interested in seeing CRM integrations, let me know which CRM you use, and I'll choose the most popular one and make a video about it. Because half the process is actually making an assistant, but then the other half is integrating it into something that's useful for you. So yeah, if you let me know what you guys are using, I can think about making another video for that. Okay, so with all the formalities out of the way, let's get into the video. All right, so I've got a high-level breakdown of the make.com scenario, as well as the additional Google Sheets that we're using to manage the conversation. So zooming in, you can see that we've got 3 key flows here. We've got flow 1 over here, flow 2 over here, and then flow 3 over here. So the way that this works is flow 1 is executed first, then we execute flow 2, and then we execute flow 3. Okay, so let's focus on flow 1 for a little bit. So just to explain these modules at a high level, we have a webhook that receives the message. We then have a Google Sheets add row module, which is going to add each message into a temporary Google Sheets. We're then going to sleep for a period of time, which is going to give us enough time to collect this small batch of messages that will come in quick succession. So like we sleep for 30 seconds, we can capture all messages within a 30-second block. And then we go off to that same Google Sheet that we initially stored the messages to. We go to that Google Sheet and we collect all those messages and we put them into one variable using this text aggregator tool. And now that we have, let's say, 4 messages, 10 messages within one single variable, we can put this variable into a ChatGPT step, and we can actually just process it as one major reply. So if I zoom out a little bit, this Google Sheet module is actually this temporary database sheet over here, which initially is empty. And then as we get these messages and they're all hitting this webhook and then they're getting added to the Google Sheet, you can see that we're now getting message 1, message 2, message 3, and message 4, which is what's happening here with message 1, message 2, message 3, and message 4. So we've added all the messages into this Google Sheet thanks to using this sleep step over here. So like I mentioned before, the sleep step is used for two main purposes. The first is to give it a human-like touch. So if you're responding back to customers immediately, they're going to know that something's up. Whereas if you have a small delay, it'll seem a little bit more like a human's on the other end. And the second reason is so you have enough time to collect the small group of messages that the customer might be sending. So if they send 4 or 5 or 6 messages in a row, you want to sleep on that very first one long enough for all the messages to come in, get added to the Google Sheet, and then you can convert them into a variable. So the max time for this sleep module, I think, is like 300 seconds. So you could start at 300 seconds and just work backwards until you find a good mix for whatever you need. So after flow 1, we have a table that's full of messages like this. Now, technically speaking, if we just leave these in here and we get another message from the user again, the same exact user, then we're gonna just append all the previous messages and all the new messages into a variable. And then the response from ChatGPT is gonna be very confusing for the customer. So we really wanna take these messages and then remove them from the sheet so that we start fresh each and every single time. So flow 2 is triggered immediately after we aggregate all those separate messages into one variable. And all we're doing here is we're going back to that same Google Sheet, and then we're iterating over each of those messages, which are these 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're building out the rest of the flow where we're basically denoting which rows we want to remove, and then making a Google Sheets API call to remove those cells, and then end up with an empty sheet like this. Now, just so you know, this is actually based on the user's number. So if this operation is for user who has a number 1, 2, 3, and then another user who has a number 2, 3, 4 actually messages, it's not going to get muddled up and delete all messages in the sheet. It's only going to delete the messages relevant to that specific number. And then over here, we have a webhook response. So actually each of our flows ends with this webhook response, 1, 2, and 3. And we use this because if you don't have a webhook response, then you're going to get a message that just says approved sent back to your customer. So these webhooks basically say, hey, don't worry about sending that default approved message. We've got this. We've already replied to the customer. So yeah, you have to have these in your flow. If you don't have these, you're going to get that approved message and you're going to be scratching your head as to why. All right, so after we finish flow 2 and we remove all the messages from the Google Sheet, we go off to flow 3. Now, flow 3 creates a response and sends it to the customer. So flow 3 starts by us going to a Google Sheets. So over here, I've got our next main database Google Sheet, which is a more permanent database and doesn't get information deleted. So you can imagine that it initially starts with no customers messaging us. So if this is your first time setting up, you're gonna have this completely empty. So what we're doing over here is we're basically going to that main sheet and we're searching for any previous messages from a customer that have a thread ID, because the Assistance API uses a thread ID to have an ongoing conversation. So we're searching for a thread ID for that customer. If none exists, we're creating a new conversation. So we're creating a new thread ID. And then we're adding that thread ID back to that main database, which is what we've done over here with our phone number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're adding our thread ID. And then we're using a text parser, which removes any of that reference information from that ChatGPT call that I made earlier that you saw it has the reference and the document name. That's how I removed that over here. So we have a text parser to remove all that. And then we respond to the customer using this Twilio module. And then once again, we have to have this webhook so that we don't send that static approved message along with our actual response to the customer. Now, as you can imagine for flow 2, so over here, we're filtering out if there's no thread ID, but if there is a thread ID, which comes back from this check, then we're gonna append the thread ID into this message and assistant module. We're gonna run it, we're gonna remove any reference information, respond back to the customer, and then leave our webhook. So once again, as soon as a customer responds back to us a second time, we've already added their information to this main database Google Sheet. We just reference this thread ID and then we add it to the message and assistant module. So now we've explained all these flows and all the Google Sheets and how it works. Let me just give you one final visual representation of what's going on. So once again, we've got these 4 messages, which are represented by these 4 operations for make.com. Operation 1 comes in first, then 2, then 3, and then 4. And I'm putting them staggered to basically represent that there's a period of time between when the first message is sent, then the second, then the third, and the fourth, because it takes some time for you to actually type out your message. So let's assume that operation 1 comes through the webhook, gets added to this Google Sheet, which is over here, and then it goes into this sleep module, and then it waits over here for however long we set. Then operation 2 goes through, goes into Google Sheets, and it waits here as well. Again, it's staggered. Then operation 3 and operation 4. Now at this stage, we've got all the messages waiting in our Google Sheets. And when the timer is done for operation 1, it moves across to the Google Sheets. And the Google Sheet is actually set up to return all the results that are relevant to this phone number. So it doesn't matter that the rest of these operations haven't made it to this Google Sheets module, because all we need is the actual phone number. That's what we're searching up against. So now operation 1 has collected all those messages, and then we've converted it into one variable, and then it moves across to flow 2. Now again, guys, these API calls are pretty much instantaneous. So this couple second delay between the first and the second message it's actually a lifetime when you're considering API calls. So that's why we can actually go to flow 2 and quickly delete all these messages before the next operation starts. So flow 2 comes into here, it collects all the messages and then one by one removes them from the Google Sheets. So by the time operation 2 wakes up from its sleep and goes to the Google Sheets, it actually is met with an empty Google Sheets. And just to zoom in, over here we have a filter between the Google Sheets and the text aggregator that says if you return no results for that phone number, then just stop the operations here. So from operation 2 onwards, we don't actually pass through and we don't actually complete any of this with any dummy data. We just fully remove ourselves from the make.com scenario. So then operation 3 comes into here. Again, the Google Sheet's going to be empty and it's going to can the responses because we're blocked by this filter. And same thing with operation 4. It comes to here, it checks, and then it's canned over here. So we're not actually wasting any cycles. So now when operation 1 is done for flow 2, we then move on to flow 3. And like I mentioned before, over here we've actually collected all those messages into one variable, which we then feed into this flow 3, and we feed it into the OpenAI Assistance API call into the Contents tab. So I'm going to show you this in a second in the actual make.com scenario, but that's how we actually get these messages and we carry them across into here. So initially we're just creating a new thread, we're adding it to the Google Sheets, we're cleaning up our response and then sending it to the customer. And then operation 1 moves out and it's completed. All right, and that was a run through of the high level flow for the make.com scenario and how it interacts with these Google Sheets and how it handles multiple messages. So I hope that was insightful. If you actually like this kind of segment, I'm happy to make more make.com tutorials or even a beginner tutorial where I break down things in this kind of depth, because if you're brand new to automation, it's difficult to know exactly how to build things out and how to think each of these individual steps through logically and how to transfer them across to make.com modules. So I hope this doesn't just show you how to run this scenario, but it also gives you some ideas and you learn something new for other scenarios that you want to run. All right, and now we're actually in make.com. So let me just run this once and show you how this operation looks. All right, so I've just split my screen over here. And as you can see, this is my previous conversation that I just had. So I've got my thread ID, which exists here already. And then in my temporary database, I've got nothing because my previous messages were cleaned up. So I'm going to go ahead and actually remove this so we can have a brand new conversation. I'm going to go across to my temporary database and show you how this looks. So now I've got this for run once, which is going to pick up the first operation, and then we're going to be able to break it down and see it. But since it's actually running, it's going to pick up all operations. So I'm going to send like 3 or 4 messages in a row. We'll see them come up into here and then get deleted. And then we're going to run through here and I'm going to show you exactly how even this text aggregator tool, which collects all the messages, how on that first operation, it's able to build that variable that contains all the messages. So let's go, hi there, what are open hours? Where is shop located? So we've got first message, second, and now third should be coming in as well. Awesome. Our operations are running, so we're actually still waiting on that first one. All right, we've just shot out to the first operation. We've done flow 2 and flow 3 is in progress. We've removed all the messages and now we should be getting a response. Awesome. So hi there, our shop is open at this time and we're located here. Now if I go to the main database, you can see that we've got our phone number and then the thread ID. So you would have remembered, so we just had operation 1, operation 1, operation 1 all the way here. And now technically over here, since we slept for long enough, we should have had all those messages collected into one variable. So let's zoom in and click this. And there we are. We had those 3 messages collected into one text variable. So hi there, what are the open hours and where is the shop located? All right, so I hope that shows you that operation 1 is the only one that was fired off. And just to confirm, we didn't get 3 messages, we only got 1 message here. And then if we look at this route, because we technically did a brand new conversation because we had no thread ID, this is our message that we sent as the user role. So hi there, what are the open hours and where's the shop located? And then over here, we had our response with this additional reference information, which if we move across to this text parser over here and I open it up, you can see the input was the response from the ChatGPT along with this reference information. But then we used a regular expression match and we removed that information from here. And that's what we had, a very nice looking and clean variable. Okay, so let's actually go through this one by one. So the webhook has a URL that we're going to be copying across to Twilio. So in your Twilio console, go to your SMS number location. So I'm going to go to United States. I'm going to go active numbers. And then I'm going to pick out the number that has the SMS capability, which is this one over here. And once again, guys, I've got A2P compliance for this phone number, so I can actually run this. But for your situation, you might need to actually create the A2P compliance for your phone number so that you can actually send messages. So I'm going to scroll down because this first configuration section is for voice, but we're not trying to call with this number. all we're trying to do is send messages. So now this is the messaging configuration. So now all we do is we go to configure with webhook when a message comes in for a webhook and just paste that make.com webhook URL directly into here. Make sure it's a post request. So this is technically an API call. When we're messaging that phone number, it goes to Twilio and we're telling Twilio, just forward that message across to this webhook over here. And that's how it lands in this webhook. Now, one last thing, guys, when you change the information, just click the save configuration button over here. And now moving on, we've got Google Sheets. So once you find your Google Sheets, I've just named my sheet name temporary database, which is this sheet over here. So you can add these titles to your sheet. So I got date, phone underscore number, response underscore message. And now all we're doing is we're adding a row. So we're putting the phone number that we got from this webhook. So Twilio actually sends a bunch of information across to this webhook, which includes the phone number, some other configuration information. So if you open this up, you'll see that the from number is here, and that's all we're using. We're pasting it into here. Now I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So I also put this little mark. You have to put this here. So when it adds this data to the Google Sheet, it includes the plus at the front of it. So over here, every number we're gonna be getting and adding into this Google Sheet has a plus in front of it for the area code. So if you don't put that quotation key into here, then this value is going to be added, but we're not going to include the plus sign. It's just going to start from the 6, but we actually want to include the plus sign because we use it later on when we're searching or referencing the number in our Google Sheets. So that's why over here we have that quotation mark, and then the message that we're appending is just from that webhook, and it's the body, which is just over here. So once again, we've got the from number over here, then we've got the body over here, which says hi there. So then moving on for the sleep module, I've got mine set to 10 seconds, but you can see the maximum is 300. You can set it to whatever you want. If you wanted to, you can actually put another sleep module somewhere else if you want to wait even longer than the 300 seconds. But I find that probably 30 seconds or a minute would be good to sleep. So you can collect all the messages and have them all added to the Google Sheets. And over here for the search rows module, so we're going back to that temporary database, and then we're going to search by phone number, and we're going to insert the from phone number. So across in the temporary database, we're basically searching for any message that is related to the phone number that we received. So basically, if we have 3 messages here, we're going to pick up all those 3 rows, and we're going to collect the messages. And once again, that from phone number is in a webhook. So I'm going to stop referencing the webhook, but whenever you see the red variable that's inserted somewhere, it's going to be one of these variables. All right, so once we pick out all the rows that are related to our from phone number, we then aggregate all the results using this text aggregator. So once again, we're just passing in the value that we just got from this Google Sheets. Select other for row separator. For the separator, put a comma and a space. You can't see it right now, but if I highlight, there's actually a space after the comma. And then over here, we're feeding in the response message, which is this over here. So you can actually see when you run the scenario, this is the actual body from the text message. And since we're searching for all rows with that phone number, we're going to be collecting each of those messages. So if there's only one message, this is only going to have one message. If there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, they're all going to be appended one by one, and the separator is going to be a comma and a space, just like you see over here. So we had 3 bundles, hi there, what are the open hours, and where's the shop located? So we get all these 3 bundles and we put them into one collection over here. So the next thing we're doing is we're taking route 1. Now we have to search the Google Sheets again, so we're basically duplicating this call over here. I'm not 100% sure why, but I think that since we're pulling in this specific functionality from this Google Sheet, for some reason the variables are wiped clean. We must like reset them into here. So we don't have access. We need to go back to that Google Sheets, find all those rows one by one, and just to open it up to show you. So going back into temporary database, we're searching the phone number field and we're inserting the from phone number from our webhook. And then we're iterating over each of these results so that we can actually remove them one by one. So in the iterator, we're just putting in the row number. So whatever we return from here, the row number is, for example, row 2. And we've got a text equation over here. I'm just going to skip it for now. We've got a Google Sheets API call. And the Google Sheets API call has a body where we have to denote which row we're actually looking to erase. Now, the way that you erase the row is, if it's row 2, you have to say that you're starting from row 1 and ending at row 2. If you want to erase row 5, you have to start from row 4 and then end at row 5. So this math expression, if I just click into it, you basically get the row number from this module and you -1. So it's the starting point of what we want to erase. And that's why we fed it into here. So the starting point is the row -1. So let's say we want to delete row 2. So we're starting at 1 and then we're ending at row 2. Now for sheet ID, which is what you need to insert here as well, go back to your Google Sheets, go to your temporary database, and in your URL, you'll see over here, there's a bunch of numbers. You just have to copy this, and this is the sheet ID that you have to use. So you just paste it into here. And then everything else you can just leave exactly as it is. If I zoom out a little bit more, The next thing I want to speak about is the URL. So to speak about the URL for a little bit, so over here it says enter the path relative to this. So this is technically the start of this API call URL, which would sit over here in this place where it is XXX. And this is basically saying, don't include this, just start from this point here. So you can just assume that this is already included. That's why it just says spreadsheets here. So it looks a little bit different. But over here, we have to / and we have to include the spreadsheet URL. So then across in your Google Sheets, you go to your spreadsheet URL, you find the sequence where it says spreadsheets / D in my case, and then / and you just double click and you take this entire section and you paste it over here, and then you just leave batch update. So this API call is basically finding that specific cell and then just erasing it. We're not actually deleting the cell. If we deleted the cell, it would shift everything up once, and then all of our information from here would actually be wrong because we've already captured which rows we want to speak about. So like row 2, 3, and 4. If we delete a row, each of those rows now changes their number. So row 4 becomes row 3, row 3 becomes row 2. And we're not handling that dynamically. So again, this API call is not to delete the row, it's actually just to erase the contents of the row. And then finally over here we have our webhook response. We're sending the status 200, which means it's successful. And then we're sending a placeholder body, which is sending a message back to Twilio saying, hey, this request has been accepted, and we're forwarding the message across to the user. You don't have to do anything about it. And this basically tells Twilio, do not send that approved message to the customer. So I'm just gonna click OK here. And like I mentioned before, so after we finish flow 1, we go to flow 2, and now we go to flow 3. So flow 3 starts with searching the Google Sheet, which is the main database. So in our case right now, my number's already added here, and you can see the thread ID is already existing. So we're searching up our main database, and then we're searching up by phone number once again, and that's gonna return all the information on that row for the phone number. So it's gonna return all this information here, and that means we have access to thread ID. So in this case that we have thread ID, we'd be taking route 2, because our filter here is actually checking for the total number of bundles. So what this means is when we're first messaging this assistant and we've never messaged before, this sheet will be totally empty. So for example, it'll look like this. So if there's no phone number, it's actually going to return no bundle of information. It's going to be 0 bundles. So this filter is basically saying, cool, if you've got 0 bundles, it means that phone number is not even there in the first place. So don't worry about it. Let's just create a brand new conversation. And over here, I'm just targeting my assistant that I made in the OpenAI backend, which is this one over here. So it's got a set of instructions. I'm using GPT-4 and I've got file search enabled. And I've uploaded a basic FAQ document. And then I'm inserting that text variable from our text aggregator over here. And then I'm leaving everything else as empty. So the thread ID is going to be empty, which is going to trigger this to create a new thread for us. After we have that new thread, we add it to our main database. So over here, we've got the main database. And now we're adding our phone number. Once again, we have that quotation mark over here to add the phone number correctly with that plus sign at the very front of it. And we can add other information here if we wanted to as well, but for now, we're just adding the thread ID that we pulled in from the OpenAI module. So when this is done, we're then using the text parser to take the value from this ChatGPT step, which is what we're inserting over here into results. So if I click this open, you'll see that this result, and it's hovering this bubble. So this is the result here. So the setup is this pattern. Now, once again, guys, this is going to be available in my Gumroad, so you don't have to exactly copy it down. But we're going to search and find this specific sequence of characters, which if I show you again, it's here, like this square brackets and some other characters here. We're going to find that sequence, and we're going to replace it with an empty string. An empty string is from this A column over here. Now, technically, we have to insert empty string here, because if we put a space bar, if we put a comma, if we put any other value, then whatever was here, it's actually going to replace it with that value. So us putting empty string means that's why we have absolutely nothing in between the Australia and then that full stop, which means all this busy information was completely removed and replaced with absolutely nothing. But again, we just have to include it here anyway. Then we're setting global match to yes, case sensitive, and then we're setting no for multi-line and single line. And once we're done, we're then sending the message across to the customer using the Twilio API call. Now for the Twilio connection, it's actually very easy to launch. You just grab some information from your main dashboard. But what you need to set up also is this A2P. So once you have it set up, this will actually come through this Twilio connection. But just to show you the actual configuration here, the to address, who we're sending this message to, is the from address from that webhook. So once again, the from address is the customer's phone number. That's why we're setting it here as the to address, because we need to message them in response now. And then we're creating the message body, and it's the parsed text from over here. So if I click on this, the parsed text is over here from this module that is now bouncing around here. And just like before, this webhook sends the exact same 200 status and then the same body message as this webhook and this webhook here. So let's click OK. And now finally, if we actually do have a thread ID, we're following much the same steps as before. We're inserting that text variable that we created from all the Google Sheet entries, which is all the separate messages. Once again, if it's just one message, this will just be one message here. If it's 5, it's going to be 5 appended into 1. And now we're passing through the thread ID, because we've obtained a thread ID from this Google Sheets over here. Moving along, we have the same setting for the text parser. We have our pattern into here, the empty string, and then our result from this ChatGPT call. Exactly the same situation with the Twilio API call as well. So the from variable is here. We're creating a body and setting that parsed text as our body for this message. And then the exact same webhook over here. Status 200, and then our response back to Twilio. Now just quickly, so after operation 1 is completed and it passes through and it goes to flow 2 and flow 3, the other operations don't actually make it through, like I mentioned before, because we have a filter. And this filter is looking for how many bundles were returned from this Google Sheets call. So when that API call comes into here and it's searching for all the entries that have that phone number associated with it, since for operation 1 we've completely deleted them, it's actually not going to find any rows of information. So this is going to return 0 bundles. So if I open this up right now and I scroll down a little bit, we've actually returned 3 bundles, 1, 2, and 3, because in our demo we had 3 messages sent. But this is for operation 1. As soon as operation 1 goes across to flow 2 and it removes all the messages, then this next operation, operation 2, is actually going to return 0 bundles. So looking at the filter one more time, we have to have a bundle that is greater than or equal to 1. So now if we inspect the results, bundle 1, which is the first message, which is like, hi there, what are the open hours and what's the location? They're all actual results and they're equal to greater than 1 because they're an actual piece of information. But when operation 2 comes into here, then it's going to return 0 bundles in the first place, and it's not going to meet the requirement of greater than or equal to 1 because it's going to be 0. So that's why this filter basically blocks all the rest of the operations from going through. All right, guys, I hope this was insightful. Once again, if you haven't subbed to my page, please sub, drop a like on the video, and then comment down what kind of stuff you want to see next. If you want to see a part 2 of this video, please let me know. If you're a business and you want to work with me, I've got my contact details in the description of this video. And once again, the blueprint for this make scenario is going to be available on my Gumroad. All right, thanks guys, and have fun with your AI SMS assistant. See ya.